mean, this is a team that does not miss any chance to finish a check, which I don't think you should. I mean, I think it's proven to be an effective strategy. They get in some little extra shots. They still have Brad Marchand and Sam Bennett, Matthew Tkachuk. They have players that like to scratch at your skin as an opponent. If not literally, then mentally. And I think Toronto definitely needs to get a reset back here. But I mean, all that being said, this is a pretty heavyweight matchup. It's a very physical series, and it's probably going 7 games is just where my mind's at. Not to be issuing predictions, but it just feels like there's not a lot between the teams, and they're each sort of struggling to be the best version of themselves within the series.
Oh, yeah. I knew at the beginning of this series this was going to go 7. I knew with the way the Leafs were playing, they were going to find a way to push it to the limit. To see the Panthers push back and tie the series, not a complete surprise, maybe a little bit just with the way that they looked in the first 2 games, but they seem to have found a way to wear down the Leafs and also keep their best players from scoring regularly, which is a pretty good segue into Auston Matthews, who only has 1 goal this postseason. He's drawn a lot of praise for his defensive play, but still just 1 goal, which was scored in that Game 6 against the Sens. Like, at some point, that goal scoring has to show itself for 34. Like, there's a reason why he's in the position that he's in. What do you think about how he's been playing in this postseason and in this series particularly?
Small correction. He did score 2 goals in the Senators series, but does not change your larger point. When you're Auston Matthews, of course, he's counted on to score more than that. And it certainly doesn't change the discussion that's building around the Leafs captain. I'm in the camp that the Leafs have dominated by and large through his 5-on-5 minutes in these playoffs. They've actually had a pretty good power play, of which he's, an important part of as well. And so I do think that does mitigate some of the, if you just go to, NHL.com and look up his stats, I mean, he's still a point per game player. And until 12 hours ago, the Leafs were ahead in a second round series against the defending Cup champions. Now, 12 hours later, they're not. And there's going to be a lot of talk about this, and it's fair game. There's no me sitting here making excuses, but I see a guy that's still winning a lot of his shifts that, has the most shots on goal by the Leafs in this series, in the playoffs, has the most individual scoring chances. I see someone with whom I expect things to change if he just keeps doing what he's doing. But, you get to this stage where everything is magnified. The Leafs only have 2 guaranteed games left this season. You need a breakthrough moment from him. William Nylander has had a very productive series here against the Panthers, 6 points in the series. John Tavares had a 2-goal game. I think Matthews and Mitch Marner in particular are under the most acute pressure. I mean, they play together at even strength, and they're probably the 2 most important members of the power play, along with Nylander. And so, yeah, I think we're just at that stage where, the Leafs, they need something. I mean, this team is actually through these playoffs, and they scored a lot of goals in this series, even after getting shut out in Game 4. And they've got, some guys doing it that you don't expect to. A lot of goals from the defenseman, Morgan Riley, for example. Chris Tanev had a goal in this series against Florida. Mm-hmm. But you got to, your horses have to kick in eventually, right? And so, we definitely are at the stage where I think that's basically knocking on Matthews' door. And, after Game 4, he mentioned he feels a little snake bit. He said that he's trying to focus on the fact that he's winning a lot of his shifts, that, he's looking at the sort of things I was mentioning at the top and putting on that there's a lot of good happening. So you can't focus just on the goal column. I think that you're going to see a push from him. We should mention too, he didn't skate at all between games 3 and 4. Obviously this has been a season where, he I don't know if he's ever got to even 100%. Don't have any reason to believe he's not in danger of missing a game in this series, but I think he's hampered a little bit too. And so he's fighting through all this. He's got to fight through the conversation, the noise, whatever he's dealing with physically, and just frankly, what the Panthers are doing to him. I mean, there's a ton of attention paid to him and to his line mates in terms of trying to shut them down. Interestingly enough, the Panthers have done it by switching away from their top line and their top defensive pairing. I mean, that's kind of unusual. Matthews was having success head-to-head with Barkov through the first period of Game 3. And at that point, Paul Maurice, late in that first period, switched to his line matchup to Lundell. They're also getting sort of what I'd call Florida's second defense pair of Jones and Mikkola. Now, Florida's one of those teams that rolls out a pretty solid top four at you. So, that's not necessarily to diminish what that pairing is. I mean, two good players, but, the Leafs need to have some success in those minutes. And really, that Lundell, Marchand, Luostarinen line for Florida has been incredibly effective at both ends of the ice in the series. So, the chess match is on. The tension is up. There's a lot of emotion in this series, and there's a lot of pressure on the guy carrying the C for the Leafs to find a way to, extend the season and get through this round. And this is a massive opportunity. I mean, there's so much focus, of course, over the years on the Leafs core. They've never had a moment like this. They were in the second round just once, and they lost in 5 games in 2023. Here they are with a best of 3 to get to the conference final. I mean, there's every team left playing has a legit Stanley Cup chance, them included, and they've got to seize on this next week to find a way and get their way through.
Absolutely. And to your point about the pressure being on Matthews, it has to be, of course, and he's earned that pressure too with how he's played. To your point, his second goal of that Senators series comes in Game 6. It comes after a Game 5 where the Leafs don't look that great. I've seen some people say that yesterday's game probably just as bad or even worse than that Game 5 against the Ottawa Senators. What do you? How would you compare how the Leafs looked on Sunday versus what they looked like in that game against the Sens?
Well, neither was good. Obviously, for me, it was the worst game of the playoffs for Toronto. I think, I go back to all those penalties, just putting themselves in that spot. Some of the decisions there. You've got hooking penalties and interference penalties. Like you've really just got some poor decision making. I mean, even the high sticking penalty Max Domi took at the start of the game. I mean, to me, it's just on a spot on the ice, kind of at the Leafs offensive blue line. There's no reason he just loses control of his stick. I mean, we've seen Max Domi in particular take some undisciplined penalties, I'll call them, in this playoffs. It just didn't look sharp. And that's between the ears. That's structurally. That's finding a way to get to their game. I mean, the best stretch, unquestionably, somehow, some way, and I guess it's Joseph Woll, who we haven't mentioned, who had a very good performance. I think if you're looking for a positive out of a game with not very many of them from the Toronto end of things, the way Woll played, was definitely encouraging, and he gave them a chance. It's the third period, and somehow they have no business only being down 1-0, but they were, and the Leafs started that period with a real push, and things were going well, and then Oliver Ekman-Larsson takes the interference penalty on Evan Rodriguez, actually knocked Rodriguez out of the game, by hitting him in the neutral zone when Rodriguez hadn't touched the puck. And that just disrupted any sort of budding momentum there. So, they just didn't have anything going at all, which is maybe the parallel offensively with the Senators game. But I think, being against the champions, being that they had earned a 2-1 series lead and then some through the first 3 games of the series. They had a lot of reason to be confident. They had a proof of concept of what they could do to disrupt the Panthers, I think, through those games. They just didn't, they never got there. And they had a really sluggish start and never quite recovered. So for me, that was the worst game. Now, it should be said, lots of teams that even go on to win Stanley Cups, there's no perfect, right? There's really, I think, the key is, and probably Florida is a good example of this, to have a long playoff run, you have to put efforts like that behind you. You have to find a way to ensure that, any sort of trends that are heading in the wrong direction are eliminated in real time. I mean, the Panthers looked absolutely awful in the first period of this entire series. They'd allowed 13 goals through 3 games. The questions they were getting from reporters were about how can you limit defensively, and how can you, that they were the ones that were under some degree of fire here, and then they win 2 big games on home ice, and now we're saying how can the Leafs handle them? So it's the nature of the beast at this time of the season. But if the Leafs play anywhere near like that, it's that I would suggest the rest of the series won't be that competitive. But that being said, I do expect them to have their own pushback and to have a regroup. And it's been a home series so far, and so if they can take care of business on home ice, they're going to head back to Florida later in the week with a really enticing opportunity, perhaps. So I think that's where the focus needs to be on the Leafs end of things.